This episode of the Gooner Ramble is sponsored by the new sporting betting app called Bookie. That's Bookee. Sign up using the promo code podcast, deposit and bet £10 in multiple bets for a free £10 bet. Please bet responsibly.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the Gooner Ramble. I hope you're doing really well following Arsenal's end to the season. Today we're talking about a slightly different topic, and that is safe standing in the Premier League. I'm joined today by regular Akhil. Ax, how are you, mate?
Yeah, good, thanks. Good.
And also delighted to be joined by Tim Payton this afternoon. Tim, how are you?
I'm very well, hello.
Brilliant stuff. So Tim, I'm going to come to you first on this. What exactly has happened in the week with regards to safe standing in the Premier League?
There's been quite a lot of developments. Maybe if I just give the context, there's been a campaign for a long time now from lots of football supporter groups and football clubs for a change in the government's law on all-seater stadia to allow standing in stadia. That might be through rail seating. I think people are familiar with that from Celtic or the Bundesliga, but also to allow standing in existing seated areas so that you can have more friendly stewarding and designate areas that people can have more of a choice of the kind of behaviour they want in their seating. So there's been a lot of pressure for that. In recent weeks, there was a big online petition which went past 100,000 signatures, which means that Parliament devotes time to debating it and lots of focus on that. And in the last week, what we've actually seen are really positive developments with different organisations like the Premier League, the Labour Party, and then even the government itself saying that they'll look at this issue more closely. So I think there's still a lot of work to be done, but I think football fans can be optimistic that we're moving towards a positive policy decision on this.
Fantastic stuff. Akhil, coming to you, why do you think it's taken so long to get into this position where safe standing is becoming a bit more of a talked about topic with regards to the Premier League?
I think it was always going to have to be after everything Hillsborough related was kind of done, and that obviously the inquiry for Hillsborough went on a while in terms of there was a lot of information there. There was a bit of a blame game at times. You have obviously the sensitivity around the families, and that's obviously rightly so. So I think all that kind of had to happen first before anything else could really happen. So now we've got to a bit of a conclusion there. A lot of the families who are involved have now kind of, don't know if they've officially supported safe standing, but they seem to be more sort of likely to, now that they're there, whoever it was isn't being blamed for obviously the tragedy in '89. So I think that's kind of partly what was holding it up, and obviously rightly so as well. But now it's kind of, we're in a place where we're looking forward now rather than back.
Great stuff. Tim, coming back to you, what is it exactly that the Premier League have said on this topic?
Well, what the Premier League have said is that they are now going to work with the government to create the position where clubs have choice. They talk about a local choice based on their own stadia, their own circumstances, in order to enable them, if they wish, to be able to offer alternatives to all-seat stadium. And that's what's been really key in this campaign. It's about giving clubs choice to do what's right within their local environment. No one knows better how their stands work, what's most applicable, and what can be done safely than the local safety group and the club. And the Premier League are going to now ask government to say that rather than having a blanket policy, that each club can do the own thing. And there is a really interesting case study coming, which is that Cardiff have just been promoted to the Premier League, and they have a slightly different licensing regime because it runs through the Welsh government system, and they already do this. So they already have a more relaxed approach and designated standing areas at seats, and it works well. And I think that's put some pressure on as well. But it's really significant because up to now, the Premier League position has not been to support a change. And the Arsenal Supporters Trust, the group which I'm involved in and Akhil very closely, we took the survey that the Arsenal Supporters Trust did of Arsenal fans, 96% in favour. We took that to the Premier League recently and had a discussion. And it does show that if you organise as fans and if you present your case well and with evidence, that often you can make progress.
Certainly interesting that 96% of people involved in that survey are for safe standing. Akhil, it's obvious that so many fans, particularly Arsenal fans, want to see this introduced at the Emirates and across the Premier League because it undoubtedly will improve atmosphere. But as a match-going fan yourself, from your perspective, what will safe standing bring that the current system just doesn't?
Yeah, just quickly on that sort of 96%, because you know, I've seen on social media people kind of talking about that figure and saying, well, I didn't fill out the survey, or it hasn't represented me, or, you know, Arsenal have 7 million followers, this was only 10 to 12,000 or whatever. But I think from when we surveyed people, when the information we got, I think was quite telling that you had, from that 96% that were in favour of safe standing, you had a big percentage of that actually were in favour, but admitted it wasn't for them. You know, some people said they're now probably too old to stand, but think it's important for the atmosphere. Some people are saying, well, I take my kids and I don't think they will be able to see if someone's standing in front of them, but it would be great to have a good atmosphere where the kids, wherever they're sitting, if it's in the family enclosure, if it's elsewhere, can start to sing along and you know, can be part of that atmosphere. So I think it's quite important to note that a lot of that 96% of fans weren't actually fans that would want to stand in the safe standing section, but obviously want to be a part of it. So it is for everyone, but you don't have to necessarily be the actual person standing in the safe standing stand. So what will it do for atmosphere? I mean, it's kind of, you know, it's telling that away fans generally are the loudest, and without the away fans you don't really get an atmosphere. And I think of games when, you know, we played at the Emirates at home to, say, Wigan on a Monday night or Swansea on a Monday night, when, you know, their fans, you know, they only brought a couple of hundred of them purely because of the travel and all that sort of stuff, or if it was in a busy period, and the atmosphere generally wasn't great. But when you have that away end packed, they tend to stand anyway. I mean, we you know, when we go to every pretty much Premier League ground now, we're always standing. You know, we're told to sit down, but no one actually does. It's not really policed. So we stand and we sing and we create an atmosphere, and the same happens when visiting supporters come to the Emirates. So if you can try and replicate that in the home end as well, can you imagine what the atmosphere will be like? Can you imagine if you have a same kind of, you know, if you have your away end at Arsenal but at home as well? I mean, you're not always going to get the same people. Some people like just to do away games, some people, you know, whatever. But if you can replicate the away end in the home end, imagine the atmosphere, and then suddenly it could thrive players on a little bit more because they've just got that support. They're a little bit more, you know, that adrenaline is pumping, which could enhance their performance. Or the TV companies would be even happier, potentially might even pay even more because suddenly their product has just increased, and everything just points to such a better atmosphere, better performances, just a better, you know, better product, which is, I think, what we want.
What do you think it is about standing up that brings out the best in fans?
Well, one of the lines I always use to people that makes them laugh, but if you want to sing, the natural position is to stand up. What happens in church or, you know, in a temple? When people sing, they stand up. It's almost about how you engage yourself. It's instinct, isn't it? Even in a seated area, if a very exciting moment happens, you stand. I think it's just more communal. It's more kind of just puts you in the right mood, in the right sense of where you want to be. But it's also got to be about choice. I just want to follow up with what Akhil said. I think it's so important that lots of people are saying there should be safe standing areas because actually they're people that need to sit. You might be disabled. I probably wouldn't take my dad to an away game in the current setup because I think he probably doesn't want to stand for the entire game. Or my 8-year-old nephew wouldn't see anything. So this is about perhaps moving to a situation where you choose whether you're in the standing area or the seated area, and you actually get more inclusivity because it works for everybody.
Yeah,
certainly would agree on that.
And I just think, you know, when you're, you know, next time, you know, you're at a football game, just measure yourself when you're chanting and you're sitting, and chanting when you're standing. So even if it's at home where you're sitting, but as Tim says, you know, when a chance hits, when there's a breakaway or when there's a corner, you tend to stand because that's just what happens. And measure the atmosphere, measure the noise levels between the two, and I think you'll see that when you are standing, you're waving your arms around more. Potentially, your scarf is in the air, and generally you can kind of, your voice can project better. And that's it's a very simple argument, but it's quite an accurate one.
Certainly. Tim, obviously we're getting that breakthrough now, but there's still quite some way to go. What are the next steps that need to happen to ensure that safe standing is introduced?
Well, what the government have said in the last week is that they're now minded to review this issue. It doesn't necessarily mean there'll be a change, but it will mean they'll probably have some kind of consultation and get some experts in and look at the subject. So what all football supporter groups and fans need to do is to keep putting pressure and evidence into that review process. They need to keep talking to their MPs and other representatives to try and get change to occur. Certainly the Arsenal Supporters Trust will continue with that, and there's going to be an important debate in Parliament on June the 25th, and then we hope we'll see a review group soon. We also need to put pressure on our clubs. It's very frustrating that Arsenal haven't been great on this issue for people like me and Akhil. Other Premier League clubs behind the scenes or publicly have called for it. I mean, again, isn't it so annoying when that team up the road do things better than us? We should never allow that. But they've actually built their new stadium with the ability to have 3,000 rail seats, safe standing areas immediately in it once the law is changed, and have campaigned for it. So one of the things we need to do, I think, is get Arsenal more vocal now. Their fans want it, so Arsenal can support it, and also get Arsenal thinking about how they might actually deliver it were changes to come in.
Obviously, it's great that the government are actually talking about it, because it's just something that's been quite a taboo subject, really. Sticking with you briefly, Tim, do you think that, Akhil mentioned it earlier, Hillsborough is still sort of a dark cloud that's looming over this topic when it comes to bringing it into government?
Well, when the government reviews it, their number one priority will be safety, and that has to come first, and that has to be right. I mean, you can't have a lack of safety at a football ground. I think with the modern grounds, the way they're built and policed and stewarded, and everyone having a ticket that takes you to a certain place, whether you stand at that certain place or sit down, it can be done. But they have to quite rightly go through some checks like that, and they'll want the local police and the local safety advisory group involved. On the Hillsborough issue, I think Akhil was absolutely right earlier on. One of the things that had to finish was the inquests into what happened there. And the inquest concluded that it was actually negligence by people, and there are now criminal proceedings against those people, so we have to be careful what we say. But it wasn't the facility so much as how it was handled, and I think that's helped. And the final point there, it was asked about the views of people, but our equivalent organisation at Liverpool, the Supporters Trust up there, is called Spirit of Shankly, and they ran a survey of their members, and they were almost the same as the AST survey. I think they were 92% in favour. And I think when 92% of Liverpool supporters are in favour, they are the most important voice of all. It shows that it really is time now to move forward and have stadia that gives you the choice of standing or sitting for all supporters.
Not too long ago, Celtic ran a trial of safe standing up there in Scotland. Akhil, how exactly did that go, and what were the results of it?
Yeah, when one of our AST meetings, we had someone from the SFF come and just explain a bit about the Celtic trial, and that was at a time where there was a lot of kind of debate about safe standing, and I know that did confuse a lot of people, because actually I think at the time, obviously Arsene Wenger, who was manager then, as everyone will know, was asked about it, and he was actually in favour. He kind of said it's great for atmosphere, and it will kind of reduce ticket pricing as well. And I think he was implying because you can have more people in the stands than you could if they were sitting. But I think I think what Arsene Wenger was saying, that's way in the future. Like at the moment, I mean, as Celtic kind of did, they had a trial where it was 3,000 seats, and that was the bit that was standing, and it was still 3,000 people. So there wasn't any more people in that section than there would have been normally. The only difference was they could stand rather than sit. So I think that's kind of important, that over the next, if it is trialled and things like that, safety, as Tim mentions, always comes first. I don't think you're going to suddenly see 5,000 people in 3,000 seats. It's going to be 3,000 and 3,000, and that's what kind of Celtic were getting at. That does it work for safety, and what's kind of the results? And I think, Tim, it was all pretty positive, wasn't it?
I think that's gone very well up there. Also, as I mentioned, there's a different but similar approach going on at Cardiff now. And of course, one of the reasons why this whole thing takes place in a slightly strange debate, I think we've both covered already, but standing in every single Premier League stadium already. And what we're trying to do is actually have it, if you like, official. I mean, even, small C conservative Arsenal have a sort of designated singing section. And I think it's accepted that you stand up in there and they don't try and steward it, and in other areas. So it's not actually that we're changing that much. We're just trying to almost get the law to have some common sense and then allow stewarding and signposting. If Arsenal said this is the standing area, they would be breaking the law, despite the fact that it would allow people to make a more informed choice about whether they were going into the right bit of the ground or not. So I really think that a mixture of Celtic, Cardiff, Bundesliga and our own games, we've shown that this can work, does work.
It's a real shame that West Brom got relegated, obviously, because they were offering themselves as doing an additional trial and things like that. And obviously being relegated means potentially the importance of that is decreased.
I think Akhil actually they put in an appeal to that, and they're still going ahead. And actually these rules and laws apply just as much, certainly to the top of the championship class. Yeah. So I think that there's still going to be a very good case study on that.
Yeah. Despite all looking also positive, for you, Akhil, can you see any issues that could potentially arise if safe standing is introduced?
Yeah, actually, I can. I can see lots of issues initially, because if you think about it, at the Emirates, you have, I mean, obviously Arsenal would never admit this, and I wouldn't expect them to, but you have Block 6 and part of 5 and 7 standing up. So you're talking a couple of thousand maybe. You have Block, I think it's about 25 or so that's behind the clock end. That's the clock end side behind the goal. You tend to have that standing up as well. And so there's kind of two sections, and then you have pockets of people elsewhere kind of standing up. And I think what the issue will be is if, looking ahead, say 3, 4 years, 5 years, whenever, and if it all comes into place and Arsenal decide, okay, Block 6 is now the standing section, Block 6 and 7 say, that's 3,000, that's our standing section, we're going to change the seats, whatever. You may, not everybody can kind of stand in that area. So you might have 10,000 people that want to stand, but only a section for 3,000. So that could be a potential problem, because actually getting into the standing section might be quite difficult. And then what happens if you don't get in there and then you start to stand up when there's a corner or when there's a chance, and then stewards tell you to sit down? Suddenly everywhere else will have to be policed really, quite significantly. And if you're not one of the lucky ones to be in the section, that could be a bit of a problem, because then stewards will be saying, well, that's the standing section. If you want to stand, you have to go there. But then the argument will be, well, I can't get a ticket there. And so you will see problems within the ground and within stewarding and stuff like that. But, hopefully things like that could be mapped out.
Bringing it back to you, Tim, what can clubs do to ensure those problems that Akhil mentions don't arise?
Well, once you have a policy change, I think what clubs need to do is have very clear policies. So they need to set out what areas will be for standing and what areas will be for seating. They definitely need to have a trial periods. And as Akhil said, I think it will take some getting used to. Although in many ways, the issue of people sitting, standing, there being conflict between them exists now everywhere. So I half agree with Akhil, but I don't think it would get any worse, because you've already got that situation going on. But what you'd look for clubs to do is to really start defining their standing areas so that people are very clear with their ticketing when they go in what to expect. And I think you probably have your standing area, you probably have your sort of more likely sitting area, and then there are areas in between where it's known that at more exciting moments you stand up. At Arsenal, you can be pretty sure that if you go into the upper bowl, that it's sitting all the time, except for at the very exciting moments, and it's certain sections of the lower bowl. So I think it will settle down quite quickly, and I think it will actually improve things, because people will be in the area that is right for them. Whereas at the moment, one of the big things that you'll see confrontation on, which stewards have to resolve, is people standing in front of people who want to sit, people standing in front of children. I think a lot of that will go away, and we'll actually have better football grounds because people will be in the right areas, and noisy football grounds with better atmosphere because people will be able to stand and sing and do as they like.
Yeah, I think ultimately you get to that. I just think initially there could be some sort of conflict there. I just think, your standing section can't be half the ground, so you're suddenly going to be a little bit more forceful with people in other sections, which is my kind of opinion. And I suppose it's, as a football club as well, you have to, it's something we've been kind of talking about for a while, about having a singing section and the whole, when you move from Highbury to the Emirates, some people were split up and all that kind of stuff. And, it's a big job then to kind of suddenly rearrange people, seating and stuff like that. But that will have to be done. And I think ultimately it's a positive thing, but I just think that sometimes that can be quite off-putting for clubs, just because it's a lot of work. But, I think it's something that does need to be done and should be done.
And just staying with you, Akhil, homing in on Arsenal, why do you think it's so important that safe standing is, or some sort of alternative method is introduced at the club? Just because it's well documented that at home we don't tend to produce the best atmosphere. Why do you think this is such an important thing to fans?
I think it's a little bit of a new start now for Arsenal and for the Emirates as well. I think obviously, a lot of the debate between fans was around sort of Arsene Wenger, was around the manager, and he's now moved on. Arsenal have moved on as a club, and I think there's a real opportunity to kind of to change a little bit and to kind of just, do things a little bit differently. And we are doing things a little bit differently. We're now off the field. We're not reliant on one man to lead the club. We've got sort of directors of football, director of academy football that's just been brought in. We've got head recruitment. We're doing things differently now going forward than we used to do. And I think that can then, that can be transferred kind of onto the pitch, or just off the pitch, ironically. But, and something like safe standing, something like atmosphere, that can all now suddenly, we can do things differently. Because, I'll tell you what, when we go to that first game of the season, and it probably will be at home because White Hart Lane won't be done yet. So we'll probably have a few opportunities initially to play at home. And there will be excitement. There will be kind of a little bit. It'll be something new. There might be fans who were Tim's favourite subjects of not putting your ticket on Ticket Exchange and not turning up in empty seats. But those kind of people might be back because they were back for the Burnley game, to say farewell to Arsene Wenger. So they'll probably be back with this new kind of enthusiasm. And I think Arsenal can really pick up on that. And I know they are trying to look at the atmosphere, and they do want to improve the atmosphere. And working with groups like Red Action and stuff, that they do want to potentially do things, but potentially they need to do more. And safe standing is one example, but there's so much more that they could potentially start to now do as a fresh start and get fans back on side. And it's kind of up to them to do it, but I hope they do.
Tim, for you, if it is introduced relatively soon, do you think it's going to make the Premier League all the more attractive to fans from around the world?
Yeah, I think it can only help because, as Akhil said earlier on, one of the reasons Premier League football sells so well around the world is full stadiums tight to the pitch, and passionate fans. A couple of years ago, the AST joined forces with other supporter groups and secured the fixed, cheaper away ticket. And the Premier League were quite receptive to that campaign in the end because they see the away fan as being particularly important. They add that sense of rivalry to the home fan. If you might not notice this, but when you watch television coverage, the cameras go to the away fans about 40% of the time, despite the fact they're only about 5% of the stadia. It's because a football match is between two sides, and you need the two sets of fans setting each other off as much as you need the players. So I think safe standing, it will add more vibrancy, more atmosphere, make supporters happier and more involved. That leads to a better product which people enjoy watching around the world.
And you know what, there's been, I think of this season, I think of times where as an away fan I really enjoyed it, and the times is when you have a real loud home section. And we, from top of my head, I remember that at Leicester at the end of the season, they've got their kind of clappers and all that sort of stuff. I think they had a drum in there as well. West Brom on New Year's Eve. I mean, New Year's Eve, it was a 4:30 kickoff, and you would have thought, geez, who wants to go to a New Year's Eve game when actually we weren't doing that well. Our away record was shit. West Brom weren't doing very well either. They wanted Pardew out and all that sort of stuff. But the atmosphere was really good. You had the away end, us, starting our New Year's Eve celebrations early, and then you had them who were just, they were singing and dancing all game kind of thing, and then obviously they got a good result out of it, and the atmosphere was really good. We've seen that sometimes at Crystal Palace as well, and it makes it so much better, and as fans in the stand, you kind of want to outsing your opposition, and generally as an away fan, it's fairly easy to do that, but if we can bridge that gap, I think it just makes it such a better product. And I think when you're watching on TV as well, I think it's great. I think it just adds to it. If you're watching even in a pub, to have that sound on, and it builds an atmosphere wherever you're watching it. If there's no atmosphere in the ground, you're not going to build an atmosphere on TV or in pubs or in bars. But if there is one in the ground, then suddenly all the bars are buzzing. If you're watching it at home with family or friends, you're buzzing because you've got that atmosphere. And I think that's so key.
Tim, I posed a question to Akhil earlier about what Arsenal can do to improve atmosphere at the Emirates. But from your perspective, what else can the club be doing?
Well, I mean, first of all, win more games. I mean, it sounds silly, but obviously fans.
But Tim, we do actually win. Despite the away record, our home form was impeccable last year.
Yeah,
that's true. But it's in the picture of when you're turning up and you're six. It definitely doesn't help. But there are lots that can be done. Definitely, a stadium that is full has got a better atmosphere and just almost gives the impression of it mattering. If 10,000 people aren't in their seats, you get the feeling of an inferior product. Arsenal, we could have a whole podcast on Arsenal's ticketing arrangements, but they're quite poor now. They need to do more to encourage people to exchange. They ought to make it easier to exchange, move tickets on and so on. I think creating more singing sections, giving support to supporters to bring banners and create noise. There's a range of things that can be done, and one of the reasons we put a lot of effort into safe standing is I think that alongside the improving the ticketing, it's probably one of the two most fundamental things that can be done now to make a change.
So obviously now it's all about getting the younger generation of fans into the Emirates, producing that atmosphere, because they're going to be so integral to our fan base in the next couple of years. Especially in this new era with Emre coming in, it's an exciting time where you want to be getting those younger people more involved. Obviously, we've got the Junior Gunners scheme, we've got Cannon Club, and Arsenal, I think, do a very good job at getting younger people such as myself into the Emirates at an affordable price. Akhil, for you, what more can the club be doing to get even younger fans, adolescents, teenagers, young adults into the stadium?
Yeah, I mean, they do. I grew up in the Junior Gunner scheme, so when I was kind of 4 years old, I was put on the scheme and I was taken to games and sat in the family enclosure at Highbury, and then I grew into a Cannon Club, had a silver for a while, and then obviously got a season ticket, like a lot of people have probably done. But it seems like I mean, firstly, the jump between Cannon Club and a full price ticket is absolutely huge. It wasn't as big when I was doing it, but it's absolutely huge now. So, potentially having a bit of a student discount or something like that. I don't know, a young person's discount. Other clubs have it. I remember, I think it was Crystal Palace again. There was on our away tickets, it kind of had three prices on there. It had the full price, it had the student price, and it had the OAP price, and it was all on the same ticket. So actually, as a steward, it was really difficult to know which one you were. And I actually got stopped once. I asked the steward where I was sitting, like if it was left or right of the stand, and then he kind of said to me, "How old are you?" And I knew exactly what he thought. He thought I'd got the student ticket, and then when I told him actually it's got all three tickets there, I'm a full adult. And he kind of understood it. But it got me thinking that actually other clubs are doing that. They're giving students potentially a slightly cheaper ticket. And I don't think that's something Arsenal do. I think they do. Do they have OAP discounts? They may have. But, for young people, that's kind of, if you think about life generally, when you're a junior gunner and even a Cannon Club to a certain extent, you're probably getting your ticket funded by parents, guardians, brothers, sisters, friends, uncles, aunts, whoever really looks after you. But when you kind of get to that age of 18 and you're not a Cannon Club anymore, you may be a red or a silver, you start to work a little bit, you may move out and have to pay for rent. Suddenly disposable income becomes quite tough, and you might not have that support from the people that used to support you. So then can you afford, I know Category C is affordable, but, we want our young fans to be in North London derbies and in London derbies and watching us against Man City, Man United, because those are the games where you want young people to be there to create that atmosphere. But if it's not affordable, then it's really difficult for them to do. I know season ticket holders who are fairly young who put their sort of Category A games on Ticket Exchange purely because they'll get some money back and then it will help them pay for the following season. And, they don't want to do that, but they feel they're forced to do that because they don't want to lose their season ticket, and they do want to watch Arsenal, but they can't afford to do it all season round. So I think potentially that could be something. We do have a young gun section, but I mean, I remember when with the AST we had someone come in at a meeting and ask us a question about it, and it was I didn't know the answer, and it took me ages to research and to actually find out the answer. So I'm not sure if the marketing is quite on point there and how easy it is to understand. I think when as an adult now, I'm 30 years old, but as an adult now, if I can't make a game, which thankfully doesn't happen too often, but if I can't make a game, if I could give that ticket to a student or to a young person, if I could, I know there's ticket transfer and ticket exchange and stuff like that, but if I haven't got the time to ticket exchange, you're not guaranteed who buys your ticket, but with ticket transfer, if I haven't got time to find someone and actually do it, if there was an automated way, and I know Ivan Gazidis talked about donating your ticket, and I think that was something they're trying to introduce, or may have already, or certainly it was on the roadmap. But things like that make it a lot easier. Make me kind of donate it to someone young and give someone a chance to come and get someone young through the gates. Hopefully they get the feel of the place, and then they keep coming. So I think it's all about sort of ticketing, really. It's the way to get young people around.
It's all about ticketing. Totally agreed with everything Akhil said. The Football Supporters Federation have kind of made this area their priority for the next stage of ticket campaigning. It's for 16 to 21-year-old, roughly, the young adult category, where you might not be in full-time earning, but you're no longer reliant on the parent, and the ticket has become so expensive. A couple of things Arsenal could do on ticketing. What about, when you go in on the exchange, allowing you to set a price below the full price? Because if you go in with a Category B, and it's Sunday at midday, you may not get that price. Why not be able to halve it and prioritise that to young people? And also, I think you've got to have a bit more carrot and stick. Akhil cares, so he's likely to go in and put his ticket up for people. But there's a lot of people that just leave them sitting in the drawer for certain games or aren't bothered, buy the ticket for certain games. You've got to start giving them incentive, or saying you only get a home credit if your ticket is made available to a young person. I think it's the next most important area, because otherwise we won't have any stadiums, in any atmosphere in the stadiums, because they'll just be full of older people.
I mean, I think Man United, there was that example in the news maybe last year or year before where an away fan didn't turn up, to collect the ticket, didn't turn up or something like that, and they got banned for like a year or something. I think that's a bit extreme for the record, but you get the point there, that someone who hasn't done anything about their ticket, I think it turned out that they weren't well or something, but someone that doesn't, like what Tim's saying, the people that don't care as much and who have season tickets but don't, I can't be bothered to go today, but don't do anything about it, I think those are the ones that need to get punished a little bit. And when I say punish, I don't mean in an extreme way, but potentially if they do it, a 3-strike warning kind of thing. If they do it once, you get a bit of a warning. You do it twice, you get a bit more of a thorough warning. You do it 3 times and you get the ticket taken away from you, or you get, something happens, because I think it's a shame when people just don't turn up to games because they can afford it. And again, it comes down to money, I think. If you're lucky enough to earn well, have a decent job and things like that, where actually you don't really care if you get the money back and if you sell a ticket on Ticket Exchange. But then at the same time, things do come up. You may have kids not well, or you may have transport issues. You might not be well. So occasionally it will happen. But generally, if you can help it, help somebody else.
Okay, and on a final note, coming to you, Tim, when do you realistically think we'll see safe standing introduced across the Premier League as a whole?
Oh, that's not the easiest question. I would be optimistic that we could see something for the start of the following season, because I think that it does need to go to review and then policy change. And it'd be unlikely that clubs would want to change things during a season. I mean, they might need to change physical infrastructure, signage and behaviour. But I think if everyone keeps pressing and there's goodwill on all sides now, I would be optimistic that we could see changes for the start of season 2019-20, and that would be fantastic. And the Arsenal Supporters Trust certainly will be pushing the government hard to reach that objective.
Okay, brilliant stuff. The future certainly looks bright on this topic. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me. It's been a pleasure talking to you about this. Where can we find you across social medias?
Well, you can find me at 10 Akhil on Twitter.
You can find myself at Tim Payton, and I also recommend you keep an eye on the AST Arsenal Twitter feed, because for campaigning, the poll information, the feedback from government and so on, we always keep the information updated there as well.
Okay, wonderful stuff. Be sure to go and check out the AST. This has been a Gooner Ramble. As I say, gentlemen, thank you for joining me this afternoon. And from myself, James, I'll be speaking to you very, very soon. See you later.
This episode of the Gooner Ramble is sponsored by the new sporting betting app called Bookie. That's Bookee. Sign up using the promo code podcast, deposit and bet £10 in multiple bets for a free £10 bet. Please bet responsibly.